Our second reader tonight is Liza Allen. As is the case with several of our winners this year, Liza works in more than one genre. She worked primarily in poetry until a class she took here at the Loft with Laura Flynn, an alum of the Mentor series, drew her to nonfiction. The youngest child of Holocaust survivors, Liza's memoir attempts to understand the effects of war and genocide have had on her family. Over the course of the year, our winners often practiced in the hall prior to their reading. Liza did so last weekend, only the hall was set for a Theater in the Round production that was happening that weekend, and the room was filled with sculpted trees and other props. Liza said, "Oh, I like this. There are distractions and there are people behind me." Well, this is our sculpted tree for the night, but we are all behind you, Liza. Please welcome Liza Allen.
Wow, it's very exciting for me to be up here tonight, especially for the last reading of this program year. The Mentor series has given me an incredible opportunity to spend 9 months working with 11 very talented writers. I want to thank the Jerome Foundation and the Loft for making this program possible, and all the mentors who worked with us this year for encouraging us to take risks and to push the boundaries in our own writing. I want to especially thank you, Jared, for your boundless generosity and kindness. I want to thank John Hildebrand, who isn't here tonight, for his insights and his encouragement. Tammy Lynn and Kata for your friendship and support. My friends and family for being here. I'm very grateful that my son Eli has come here from Baltimore and my daughter Anna is here from Tel Aviv. Tonight wouldn't have been the same without you guys. I'm also very appreciative to my daughter Abby, who has come to most of this year's readings and has given me many pointers along the way to help me prepare for tonight's reading. Tonight I'm going to read from the opening of a memoir that I'm working on about my experiences growing up as the youngest daughter of Holocaust survivors. And the opening, just so you have a little background, is when I'm about 19 years old. After my mother died, our house became a collection of disconnected spaces. When one room was lit, the others were dark. The hallway that was a conduit between them had a ceiling light that was rarely turned on. To someone looking in from the outside, it might have seemed that the house was in perpetual darkness. For as long as he could, my father avoided rooms that most reminded him of her, entering their bedroom only after he was so exhausted that he could hardly keep his eyes open. The bedroom was, for most of my parents' marriage, a refuge, a place where my father could safely pour out his pain, and my mother would patiently drink it in. At night, as they lay in the dark, the uncluttered room coaxed their hidden thoughts out into the space they shared. The bedroom was where they planned and imagined a future that was always an improvement over their present lives. The future was where there would be more money, more time, less exhaustion. Still, after months of being a widower, he saw reminders of her everywhere. Their clothes commingled in the closet they had shared for 30 years. When he opened a dresser drawer, he found her nightgowns still neatly folded near his V-neck t-shirts. In the bathroom, her toothbrush hung in the metal holder above the sink next to his, as it always had. On the morning of her funeral, my mother's brother Bill phoned and my father took the call in his bedroom. When he was on the phone, I stayed in the pantry, hiding from the parade of women bringing bundt cakes and boiled eggs into our kitchen. They filled the refrigerator with odd-shaped foil packages. The house began to smell like herring and tuna fish. When he got off the phone, my father walked into the kitchen, still in his pajamas, and sat at the table near the window. "Does God think I haven't suffered enough?" he asked. He looked at me and continued, "You know, in the old country, the rabbis would say that if a person died between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, that he was a tzaddik, a righteous person. You know, I thought about this many times," he said, "and wondered if maybe it's true, or if maybe it's bullshit." I was rinsing a few dishes in the sink and was reminded that he had given up on God and people years before. "Not one person from my family survived, not one." He stared into the space between the table and the window. "I lost everyone in the camps. After the war, we were so shriveled, so starved, we couldn't even recognize ourselves. The first time I looked into a mirror, I cried." He lifted his cup and stared down at the brown formica. "My parents had been inseparable since 1946. At night, her breath near him kept him alive when he returned to that place in the darkness where no one could reach him. Now that she was gone, who would bring him back? What would happen to him if no one else could find him there? At that moment, I realized that without her, he believed he had no reason to go on. Without her, he again believed he had lost everyone. I had always known that Shirley, Jack, and I had been only lame replacements for the family he lost, and we never really filled the void. You know, your mother and me, we saved a few dollars each month, kept putting away and kept putting away. We thought it was finally our time. And now this." His voice trailed off. "Thank you for breakfast." He stood up and put his cup in the sink. "Now go get dressed." He smoothed the side of my face with the palm of his hand. "A Shana Madel," he said. His eyes stared into mine. "You look more and more like your mother," he said, after a long pause. A few months before, in late summer, my mother's body was overcome by cancer. Her abdomen had grown round, the tumor inside amassing energy of its own, leaving little space for breath or movement. From a distance, her silhouette looked foreign, her hair thinned, her back stooped, her belly enlarged under her blue sleeveless nightgown. Most days, the heat and humid air made everything outside sickeningly full and ripe. The leaves on the elms were giant hands waving to me from outside the window. The lawn was high and green, a carpet that I rolled into over and over as a child, feeling 1,000 blades of grass brush against my leg. The lilac bush in the backyard had over time become overgrown, its thick limbs strained to hold on to the heavy load of its branches. Sometimes when she slept, she turned her body toward the window. If the blanket was pulled up high and the shades were down, everything seemed exactly as it had always been. Nothing seemed out of place at all. I sat near her bed while she slept. Her hands were warm, and the veins just below the skin were raised. Those hands could wash dishes in water so hot it would burn most others. My hands were never as tough as hers, never had to be. Now those hands looked frail and childlike, almost breakable. For years, my mother's hands washed her mother's hair, massaged her arthritic joints, her back and wrinkled arms. My mother's hands counted out Oma's pills and buttoned Oma's dresses. Those hands that I had studied my whole life had always reached for Oma's hands, held onto those hands, comforted her late at night. When I was young, I watched my mother move through the house from task to task, repeating them over and over, day after day, the same tasks in the same order at the same time. She woke on weekdays always at 6:45 and put on the outfit that she had laid on the chair near her bed the night before. In the kitchen, she made a glass of tea, buttered some toast, cut up a pear or apple, and brought those things to my grandmother. While my mother was at work, Oma kept the house clean. Her routine started early in the morning, making the beds, dusting the dressers, running a carpet sweeper across the bedroom rugs. Oma talked to herself and cursed the Nazis. In the afternoon, she scraped carrots and boiled chicken and watered the plants. By the evening, when everyone was home, Oma began spitting out curses and criticisms. She started arguments with my father and my brother, with me and my sister. My mother always defended her. After dinner, my mother helped Oma get ready for bed. I waited in the kitchen and listened to their conversations in Yiddish, a language I struggled to understand. My grandmother cried and my mother hugged. My mother moved around the space of the room, straightening the metal TV tray next to my grandmother's bed that was crowded with pill bottles and sticky glasses of old tea, a plate of fruit, her eyeglasses. I sat on the floor outside my grandmother's room while my mother helped Oma into her nightgown and brushed out the long rope of her gray hair. At the end of their nightly routine, my mother would pick up my grandmother like a bundle of laundry and place her in the center of the bed, tucking the sheets around her, carefully placing the quilted blanket on top. They would say goodnight and kiss. My mother would turn off the light and shut the door. By late summer, the tumor inside my mother's abdomen was so large that my mother was unable to roll over and sit up in bed without help. One morning she cried, "Mama, Mama, I need you." She cried into the air, into the very room where she had assisted Oma to sleep just a few years before. I walked to the side of the bed and she took my hand, silently allowing me to help her. It was rare that summer that my mother accepted assistance from me for tasks more complicated than making a cup of tea or answering the phone. It was curious to me that at the end of her life, while I was sitting next to her, watching her every breath, to make sure there was always another one, my mother wanted only her own mother. It was curious to me that I wanted only her and she wanted only someone else, someone gone, someone who had always wanted more than my mother could give. I was suddenly aware that the longing for someone who struggles to love you back might never go away. We weren't going to find the drug, the treatment, the one thing that might cure her. So instead, we talked about other things, as we always had, when the thing in front of us was too frightening to acknowledge. We talked about how hot it was outside, how deep the water in the carport got when the drain clogged after a rain. We talked about how the Vienna bread at Willette's Bakery is always best when it's fresh, and the cheese Danish are better than the fruit-filled ones. We all agreed that if you want a good rye bread, it's best to go to Cecil's around 10 a.m. when the loaves first come out of the oven. Filberts are best in November. Blueberries are better in late summer than in mid. If you buy too many peaches, you can always cook them into a compote, but half of it will eventually get thrown out. That summer, we talked about mundane things to make the time pass more quickly or to slow it down. We talked to avoid the silence that scared us. We talked to fill the empty spaces between us. There is a superstition that my family practiced around naming things that are scary and hard to talk about. You might bring the evil eye upon yourself or someone else if you said out loud the things that you most feared. If by chance you mention a sickness, cancer or heart disease, an elder would immediately say, "Poi, poi, poi," and spit 3 times. This odd ritual was done to scare off the evil eye, counteract the effect of your naming the event. It would, hopefully, cancel things out, even the score. In my family's view, naming things was never good. It was better, in fact, to leave things unnamed, unspoken, hidden. So my mother's imminent death never got named. We never really acknowledged that she was dying, and so we never said goodbye. We simply held onto her hands, brought her water, made her sandwiches, dialed the phone, helped her in and out of bed, opened and closed the shades as our bodies moved aimlessly through the thick, dark air.